I'm Nate Eaton, and today I'm talking with Frank Montoya. He has a long, distinguished career with the FBI, retired a few years ago, but before his retirement, he was the special agent in charge at several field offices across the country. And Frank, I wanted to ask your opinions, your thoughts about the disappearance of Gabby Petito. Here we are, several days into this investigation. What sticks out to you at this point?
A number of things, Nate. First and foremost, that she's missing. And no one has, including her parents or her family, have heard from her in a number of days. And so, what are the circumstances surrounding that disappearance, so to speak, and the questions that are raised from it, in other words, or arise from it. The one first being, did she walk away? Is she somewhere out there and she just doesn't want to be found, or did something bad happen to her? And then you look at some of these other events that surround that, and it definitely, there are some suspicious activities, at least as I would characterize them, that are underway that law enforcement is looking at right now, and in particular with an eye at, for instance, her boyfriend / fiance, who is, I guess, has now been named a person of interest.
So one of the big questions, Frank, is why isn't the boyfriend talking, and why would he leave this part of the country and drive home to Florida without her?
Well, that's a primary basis for law enforcement's suspicions of him at this point in time. And that is because he was with her. That was well documented on their social media pages. They were traveling, across the country. There was this incident in Moab where a police report was taken. No charges were brought, but at the same time, the report makes it clear that there was an altercation between the two. That perhaps mental illness issues were involved as well. But the fact of the matter is there was an altercation, according to that report. And then apparently she turns up missing. And then after she turns up missing, he returns to Florida. The van turns up. Apparently he's driving it. Is it his? Is it hers? And then he's not talking in terms of where she might be. So that suspicion is why law enforcement efforts are focused on him right now.
A lot of the comments from people across the country say, why don't they just go over and arrest him and make him talk? Obviously, we know that you can't just do that unless you have some sort of probable cause or some sort of evidence tying him to that. But is there a point where that could happen, where they say, okay, he's no longer a person of interest, he is a suspect, and here's why?
Yeah, it all depends on the types and kinds of information that they develop. I mean, you were seeing that in another big case that you guys covered, up there in Idaho with Lori Vallow and Todd Daybell, where there was a lot of time that transpired between when her children disappeared and when the law enforcement was finally able to charge them. So the reason why those delays occur is because you have to build a case. And so for this individual, Petito's fiance, to become a subject or a suspect in this investigation, there's got to be information that leads law enforcement to that. Now, having said that, I will also add that it seems like there's a lot of information that they can act on, that they're sifting through now, that may lead to exactly that declaration that this individual is a suspect, or perhaps may even be charged with a crime, if they can build or find the evidence that would support that. And I say that because of the enormous amount of social media that is out there, the fact that they were, it was known that they were traveling throughout the United States, and take in particular their Utah activities, because that was being posted on Instagram or that was being posted on YouTube. So there are going to be other people out there that will remember meeting them, or and then seeing something that they posted on the internet, and then started reading about this, where they might come forward to law enforcement and say, hey, there's this that you might check into, there's that you might check into. And then law enforcement also now has the van, and they're going to do a thorough search of that van, and who knows what they come up with there.
So her family has issued several statements over the past 2 or 3 days. And then the police have been holding news conferences regularly. And all of these are putting pressure, or appear to be putting pressure on him. Why don't you talk? Even his parents, why don't you say something? Do you think that's a strategic effort to put that pressure so that hopefully they will encourage him to talk, rather than having the cops go in and try to talk to him?
Well, I think at first, at least, it was anger and frustration and concern that were causing the parents, at least, and some of their friends to speak out publicly. I mean, it's been pretty highly publicized that her father or stepfather, I believe it is, has gone out has come to Utah or perhaps Wyoming, out the Grand Teton area to help with the search. So there's been a lot of that initial reaction that way. But I think you're also hearing the family talk about how maybe need to let the investigation run its course, at least in these initial stages. And so they may perhaps become a little bit more or a little less public in their commentary in order to give the investigation a chance to work itself out, at least these initial phases. Because, on the one hand, and this is the challenge that law enforcement faces all the time, publicity is good because it may drive leads, but publicity can also be bad because it gets in the way of some of the really hard work of scrutinizing information to determine what is evidence versus what is just not evidence.
Mm-hmm. The other big development is the possible connection to a couple who was murdered in Moab around the time that Gabby and her boyfriend were there. And the police have not confirmed that they're connected at all, but they've got to be looking at it. Right, Frank?
Absolutely. I saw that report this morning, and you would be derelict in your duty if you did not look at that in terms of possible connections. Again, it's not to say that anybody's guilty of anything at this point in time, but you're looking at two different kinds of, one was a crime, these two individuals that were killed, another where this young lady Petito shows up missing. If it was a crime that led to her disappearance, could there be a connection, and could it explain why she is missing at this point in time? So yeah, they're going to have to look at that. Again, this is where forensics may prove helpful. I mean, the law enforcement up in New York, I believe, or down in Florida, one of those two places, they have the van, and they're going to be going through that with a fine-tooth comb, so to speak. Could they find something that possibly explains Petito's disappearance, and is there anything pro or con that either links this activity to the homicides, the other homicides in Moab, or clears these individuals, or something in between? So a lot to sift through, a lot of possibilities there. But in answer to your question, yeah, they need to look at this. It's just because of the timing, because of the sequencing, it's at least worth looking at as in terms of a possible connection.
You've got so many jurisdictions involved here: Florida, New York, Utah, Wyoming, Grand Teton Park. Putting on your investigator hat, what do you do next? If you were leading this investigation, what do you think the investigators are doing today, tomorrow?
The multi-agency aspect of this sounds familiar, doesn't it? And this is where, for instance, the FBI can be very, very useful, even if there isn't per se a federal jurisdiction, and that's in helping coordinate activities, using its platforms to publicize what needs to be publicized to try to generate leads. But right now, yeah, it's about finding out, as far as next investigative steps, going through that van, looking at all of the social media. It's my understanding that before they took this trip in the van, there was another trip across country in another one of her vehicles. Looking at that, just in terms of the communications that were going on, were there any kinds of texts or emails or telephone conversations between them or with other individuals that might shed some lights on possible motives? And I mean, until she is found, or somebody talks, or they find a smoking gun, so to speak, this is still a missing persons case. And so is it possible that she's just missing, or and perhaps ask this guy not to say anything about it, or did something more sinister occur, and that's why he got a lawyer and won't be talking, or isn't talking? So yeah, they're going to be looking at all of that information that is already out there to see if that can add up to a potential motive, and then go from there. The key in this investigation, just like the investigation you guys worked up there in Idaho, is communication between the agencies, making sure that whatever one side is doing, the other side knows about, so that they can keep in sync with what they're trying to do, which ultimately is find this girl.
And let's hope it happens soon, very soon. Frank, thank you very much. Anything you want to add?
No, it's, just another one of those mysteries that illustrates just how strange human nature can be sometimes.
Absolutely. We'll stay on top of it. Appreciate it, Frank.
You bet. Thanks to you, Nate, for all the great work you guys are doing.